So yeah, I think we've had a couple other people join. I guess I can just give a quick intro to Peaks's work. So Peaks was a senior research fellow at the OII, and now they are elsewhere. They are at the UAL's Creative Computing Institute. I always read it, Critical Platform Studies Group, of which they are a co-director. But so senior lecturer and leader of the MA program at UAL's Creative Computing Institute. And yeah, they've gone all over the place with their work, participatory action research and mixed methods, and they started at MIT, and somehow we're here. So I think that's as good enough an intro as I can really muster, and I will hand it over to you, Peaks.
Thank you, Tomas. That is a perfect description. Can you all, oh no, I have to share my screen. Can you all see my slides now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, yes.
Isabel, delighted to be here. I'll say more about that in a moment, but I just wanted to begin by acknowledging that today is 1 year after, exactly on this day, the murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police. And just over the weekend, there was some very bad news locally. Sasha Johnson, who, at least if the news is to believe, self-described as the Black Panther of Oxford, was shot in Peckham, which is the neighborhood that I currently sit in right now, and is currently in critical condition in the hospital. So if any of you were participating in the Black Lives Matter protests last year, you might have heard Sasha's name. This is a pretty disturbing situation. I just wanted to acknowledge that kind of current time and place context. Most of the talk today will be about exploring the flat Earth. I think it will also be a talk that's kind of full of surprises. Flat Earth, as I'm sure you all know, being here is just a fascinating topic. And for me, there will be some personal aspects as well. And so I just want to give a few trigger warnings for the pieces of sensitive content in the talk. There will be some discussion of mental health issues and discrimination. There will be some on the topics of bullying and harassment. And I just that was the trigger warning for my first slide. Whoops, sorry about that. Oh, shit. As I mentioned a moment ago, this talk I expect will be very personal and intense. It's the first time I've given this talk, and it's also the first time that I've been back at Oxford, in the sense, I guess I've actually been physically back at Oxford, but this is the first time I'm back at Oxford, like doing something, even though I'm not physically back at Oxford, but you get what I mean. I left Oxford in January, and yeah, so this talk will be interesting for me for that reason. Yeah, and all will be revealed in due time. Further disclaimers are that everything I'll say in this talk are, in my estimation, defensible on scientific grounds. I will make every effort to hedge all the claims that I make at the level of my own subjective uncertainty, and there is going to be plenty to discuss and nitpick about. So I would just ask that you hold the questions to the end as best you can manage, but feel free to pop stuff in the chat and we can get to it at the end. Okay, here's the poll. Isabel's going to help me out with this one. Which of the following best describe your beliefs about the shape of the Earth? The options are: I am 100% certain the Earth is round, and I am not exaggerating. You are 100% certain. I am more certain than not that the Earth is round. I am more certain than not that the Earth is flat. I am 100% certain that the Earth is flat, and I am not joking. Other, or I'm I'm not sure. Just give that another couple seconds for people to consider. How's it looking, Isabel? Wow.
Round Earth has the early lead, but it's still too early to call it.
How many, it doesn't say how many votes are in.
I can read them to you if you like.
You've got about 61% of people have voted so far. I'll just
I
relaunch
think-
it for a second in case.
I think it's funny, but yeah. Interesting. It's actually surprisingly consistent, the results of such questionnaires. Currently 60% of people are 100% certain that the Earth is round, 24% more certain than not, 5%, which looks like probably one person, is certain the Earth is flat and not joking, and 10% are other. Just for comparison, I posted a Twitter poll that had really pretty similar results. Well, actually, a lot more other. A lot of people who say other then follow it up with, oh, it's an oblong spheroid or whatever. So being generous and grouping other and round, we have around 60 or 70% being pretty certain it's round, potentially. I'm just gonna give you some ballparks here. For all of you who said you're not absolutely certain, not 100% certain, for the purpose of this talk, I'm gonna group you as flat earthers. Welcome to the community. According to a couple polls that I took on Mechanical Turk, you're in good company of about at least 30% of those Turk studies participants. And similarly, in a Qualtrics panel that I did, which was trying to get not a random sample, but a representative sample of the United States population, again, about 30% were not completely certain. So I think a lot of times people talk about the flat earthers as being like a fringe community, but you know, it might be that the emperor has no clothes. There's actually a lot more people who are uncertain than readily disclose that. So thinking though, in terms of the flat earthers that you've probably heard about in the news, the people who go online and share memes and debate the merits of heliocentric versus geocentric models. Why would someone in that kind of particular, not just online, but online and offline community, believe that they have not just maybe be uncertain about the shape of the Earth, but actually believe that they've been lied to and that there is a global conspiracy that the Earth is in fact flat? Just a couple reasons that people frequently give to lay the groundwork here for thinking about this space is that the space industry is 300 billion British pounds worldwide. That is just shy of the total size of the tobacco industry, which we know is, perpetrated a totally confirmed conspiracy for decades about the health of cigarettes. So the stakes are similarly high for the space industry. In the United States, the NASA budget is $63 million per day. That's enough money to make a Hollywood blockbuster every day. Is something that you'll hear flat earthers say sometimes, and it's true as far as I can tell from crunching the numbers myself, which is usually used in reference to things like images from space and that kind of evidence. The UK here locally aims to capture 10% of the space industry. I think this might be the next 10 years. So 10% of that 300 billion. There's also been just a lot of media coverage of flat earthers themselves and kind of flat earth beliefs. This, you know, unsurprisingly, if you're familiar with kind of what the dynamics of information and disinformation, provides exposure to this particular set of beliefs and provides a way into the world of flat earth for some people. Obama himself, in a talk or in a speech, said, "We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society," which has made the rounds. And the UN map looks a lot like the Flat Earth map. The UN map of the world, and the map of the world in the UN's logo looks quite a lot like the Flat Earth map. So those are some reasons that flat earthers often quote. This is not just a United States or Canadian phenomenon, but actually there's quite a lot of activity here in the UK as well. I just now want to take a moment for everyone to reflect on your own beliefs again about the shape of the earth, and just to think about, you know, maybe when you were taught that the earth is round in school, or when you've dipped a toe yourself into the kind of flat earth stuff online to explore what people are talking about, or maybe an experiment or two that you've done yourself. Just to think about why all of us hold the beliefs we hold, whether they are that the earth is round or that the earth is flat. Normally I would invite discussion at this point, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to fly through some typical things that people say when I've talked to folks about why they think in particular that the earth is round. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, I've looked out a plane window and you can tell it's curved." This is my favorite reason that people give, because I've looked out a lot of plane windows and I have never seen the curve out of the plane window. David might be willing to share also some further investigation that David was able to do with a pilot in his network. But yeah, I think it's an interesting case because it seems like people actually like rewrite their memories in order to conform to their belief that the earth is round when thinking about what they see through a plane window. I haven't systematically studied that, but that's the impression that I've gotten from talking with people, and also from how I was thinking about it myself when I first started thinking about this stuff. People also say boats on the horizon. This one is like this experiment probably will work. The idea is that if there's a building or if there's a boat that's far enough away on the water, then if the earth is round, the boat or the building should dip below the horizon rather than disappear into the horizon. And I've tried this myself as well, and I don't know. I think my vision just isn't good enough. So I got a camera that has a big zoom, but I haven't had a chance to get over to Blackpool or Bristol with my Brighton. I forget which one it is with my camera. One friend of mine claimed that they live in an apartment building where if you're on the bottom floor, you see the sunset, and you take the elevator and you go up to the top floor and the sun is still there. I haven't visited this person, but I would really, love to check that myself, because I've also tried this just with, like, you're supposed to be able to stand up on the beach and see the sun after it's set, but I haven't been able to replicate that experiment myself either. A lot of people will say time zones, that one reason you might believe the earth is round is because of the way that, you know, one side of the world is dark and the other side is light. The geocentric model, or the flat earth model of Earth's geography actually, you know, has a particular way of accounting for that, the possibility of time zones in a flat earth model. So, you know, there's at least an alternative explanation. flight times, it turns out that because the typical flat Earth map is one with the North Pole in the middle, most of the flight times between locations aren't changed on a flat Earth map versus on a globe. You have to be flying from some places in the southern hemisphere for there to be differences, and there aren't a lot of flights from those places to each other. I have done the math in this one, and I'm sorry to say to the flat earthers that the round Earth model checks out on this particular test. Another fun one that people sometimes mention is that, like, why would the moon be round and all the other planets would be round and the Earth would be flat? This pictured on the screen is a meme that kind of pokes fun at flat earthers by showing all the pictures of the solar system and the planets, and then with a flat Earth, juxtaposed against all the round other planets. It's funny because when I first became I first came to understand more about the flat Earth perspective just reflecting on a map of the solar system, which, like, if you forgot the Earth part of this diagram, like, that is not what the universe looks like. This is a totally, cartoon version, obviously, of what the solar system looks like. And in fact, when you look at the shapes of celestial bodies, like, they don't look like spheres at all. Like, a lot of them, like, this is a picture of an asteroid that, like, I don't know, would you call that round? Would you call that a globe? This one was in the news a couple of years ago as like a especially unusual asteroid. I don't know if y'all remember this. I forget the name of it myself, but that to me looks pretty flat for a celestial body. And according to the geologists, I just learned yesterday from my Twitter poll, there's a special way of measuring the shape of the Earth using some, like, physical simulations, supposing that all the Earth is covered in water, and it was just what's the shape based on that assumption plus the rotation of the Earth and gravitation, something along those lines. And this, my very basic understanding of what a geoid, I guess, is, would potentially be a different way to think about the shape of the Earth, which again, like, doesn't look, it just doesn't look like a ball to me. So we go from thinking about the shape of the Earth to being a sphere to maybe the shape of the Earth being like an oblong spheroid, which is like, okay, so we're getting into like flattish round territory. And then like geoid, okay, well, it's not only flattish round, but also like has these irregularities, like, what's going on here? Or is it just like, maybe it's just a big pancake, but with two sides? So I think the fact of the matter is that most people just trust, probably your grade school teachers or your primary school teachers and and the fact that your GPS works, and the scientists say that relies on the Earth being something like a sphere around, and satellites work. It feels to me like this is the main like actual sources of evidence that people are using and thinking about being so certain that the Earth is round. So thinking about that social context for beliefs about the round Earth, and also thinking about the social context of the flat Earth community, the first research question here is going to be, how are the vast epistemic differences between round earther and flat earthers culturally and institutionally maintained? And I have two hypotheses. Hypothesis one is that for most of you in the room, you shouldn't be as certain as you claim to be that the Earth is round. According to a suitably defined logical rational observer with the same evidence that you have, they would not be 100% certain. And two, the fact that you claim to be so certain just makes you look ridiculous to me. Those are my two hypotheses. Okay, so because according to the conversations that I've had with people, it seems that most often round earthers are relying on authority and social evidence, I have to say a bit about my own credentials to establish my authority here as a scientist. So this is my institutional affiliations at MIT and Berkeley and Oxford, MIT where I did my PhD, and Berkeley postdoc in Oxford where I was faculty. Lots of publications and awards and fellowships and whatever. It's my big credentials right there. Moreover, I am an expert, according to Oxford, still on the Oxford Institute, on the Oxford Internet Institute's website. I'm an information scientist who studies beliefs, ideologies, and institutions. So, presuming that Oxford is the best university in the world, I guess that makes me a world expert in beliefs, ideologies, and institutions. At least that's what it says on the Oxford website. So you should listen to me. And I have tried a few things I mentioned before. I tried checking the flight times. I tried looking at some boats and buildings off to the horizon, tried staring out plane windows, collecting testimony. And it's honestly like 2 to 2. Like whoa, is it like whoa? Just like counting those pieces of evidence. I don't know. The jury's out. You can also think about the question of whether the Earth is round or flat in just a completely different way. So topologically speaking, if you talk to many mathematicians, will tell you or be able to confirm to you that the cube is actually a sphere. And do you think the Earth is a cube? I don't know. Similarly, mathematicians might also be able to confirm to you that if you ignore Antarctica, which I feel like is a safe, assumption to make, let's just forget about Antarctica for a second, then a globe Earth would be topologically equivalent to a disk Earth. So, if you think it's a sphere, it's equivalent to thinking it's a cube, which is equivalent to thinking it's a long rectangular prism. If you think it's a globe, then remove Antarctica, it's still a disk, topologically speaking. Mathematicians don't lie. Also, this is getting into a little bit more wild territory, and I do not know physics. So please, if there are some physicists in the room, I'd love to hear from you about the plausibility of this potential explanation. But what if the Earth is flat, and when you go to the North Pole, you just enter, I guess, well, this isn't quite accurate, but on this map, you'd go from the North Pole to the South Pole. But if you go to the one point where it's supposed to lead to the other on this flat map, then actually you're just transported into an identical world that's in like a different space-time reality. And there's just this infinite plane of worlds that we're traversing through as we step forward on any particular step. According to Cornell scientists, space-time is an exciting, mysterious world. So who knows? For further discussion, I would say. I don't like the conspiracy part used to catch me up because why would the UK or why would China or why would other countries be participating in this global conspiracy? I don't know. This isn't what I would consider the most strong evidence, but I do have a personal anecdote that at least would be consistent with the presence of a global cover-up of the flat Earth truth, which is that I had this profile picture. This is a picture of me from a couple of years ago. And when I first was at Oxford, this was actually the profile picture that I gave to HR in order for them to put on the website. This, you might notice, is a picture in which I'm wearing a t-shirt from the Flat Earth International Conference, which is one of the places where I did my field work for this research. And what happened was, when they put this image on the website, they cropped out the flat Earth part of my t-shirt. Now, it didn't seem to be enough because then there was actually quite a dispute that I had with my boss still about the shirt that I was wearing. You know, I don't know, I'm not necessarily sure, I guess the image, dispute about the image that I had. And so ultimately I had to get rid of this picture entirely. Yeah, I mean, the Oxford Internet Institute is one of the world's leading institutions for the study of disinformation, at least regarded as such, and of course has ties to a variety of funding agencies, national and international. So if it could be anywhere, I guess it would have to be here too. I also had a rather short time at the OII. Joined in 2019 in June on a 5-year contract, and I thought I was doing okay for a couple of years, but ended up leaving in January this year. Still at Somerville, though, although I haven't been there in a while, Somerville College. So my second research question is, was I forced out of my role at the OII because of my flat Earth research? So this brings me to a more theoretical part of the talk, in which I will aim to argue that we can characterize beliefs about the shape of the Earth, both flat Earth beliefs and round Earth beliefs, as less epistemic and more normative, in that we can think about round Earth beliefs as being a social norm rather than something that is based on rational deliberation on observed evidence. At least I would argue that a significant part of round Earth beliefs have that character. So to lay some definitions down, the social norms are the informal rules that govern behavior in groups and societies. And norms function to hold us accountable to each other for adherence to the principles that they cover. Norms often provide a solution to the problem of maintaining social order. And one characterization of social norms in particular that I want to draw on here is that social norms, at least some types of social norms, are also associated with sanctioning behaviors. So individuals who believe that a sufficiently large subset of the relevant group or population being analyzed is following a social norm if they expect that that large enough subgroup of the population expects them to conform to that particular norm. Not just expects, but prefers them to conform, and may sanction behavior that does not conform to the norm. So the important part of this characterization is that one indicator for this type of norm is that when you break the norm, the punishment for breaking the norm or the sanction for breaking that norm is disproportionate relative to the action of having broken it. And thinking about round Earth beliefs as social norms, I want to also draw in that second definitional component about how norms function to hold us accountable and provide a solution in a kind of functionalist view to the problem of maintaining social order. So to the extent that norms are something, or this particular kind of norm I'm talking about is something that when you violated it, you'll be sanctioned. The way that a round Earth belief would be understood that way is that you're punished for instance, saying that the Earth is flat, or really earnestly believing that. You're punished not because of the truth value of that belief, but because of its threat to power. And so to the extent that if round Earth beliefs are a social norm that's upholding particular power structures, then you're punished for not believing that the earth is round, because that belief is a threat to power, regardless of the truth value of that belief. In some of my own explorations of this idea, I've talked with some people, and I once met a taxi driver who had previously been a pilot. I was actually, it was a wild coincidence because it was while I was leaving the Flat Earth conference that I had attended and driving back to the airport. And I was telling the taxi driver about how I had just been at this Flat Earth conference, and they had told me that they were a pilot. And so I asked, oh, do you ever see the shape of the earth from your pilot seat? And they just completely stopped talking about that and changed the subject completely. And I felt like this person just thinks I'm crazy. I've had friends ask me if I'm okay when I talk to them about this research. I've almost had, it felt to me like I've almost lost friends because of talking about this kind of work. Most colleagues think I'm joking. Asking for proof is not allowed. Entertaining the possibility that the earth is not round is not allowed under this social norm. So what is this particular fear that is driving the sanctioning behavior behind challenging people or punishing people who challenge the notion that the earth is round? I think we can start to understand this by looking at some social theory on deviance as madness. The great French philosophers of the 20th century have helped us understand how characterizations and psychiatrics around what are characterized as mental illnesses like schizophrenia are related to the ability of people to perform and work in a capitalist society, or to not work or to not want to work. The various and historically also medically diagnosed, but now more kind of just commonly misogynistic beliefs about women's sanity or insanity. Kate Mann has quite cogently argued is simply, or in great part at least, just a component of the kind of cultures of patriarchy and domination along gender lines in our society. Similarly, gender dysphoria, being transgender and trans issues are still medicalized and treated as mental health issues. To be trans is at least to be trans and suffer from gender dysphoria is not just a diagnosable medical condition, and often one of the barriers to getting gender affirming healthcare, but actually technically labels you as mentally ill, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual used in psychiatrics. And one thing that all of these three examples share is the way that these forms of deviance are in opposition either to capitalist power structures or power structures around gender. And we see in each case this deviance that you know, might come from wherever, being naturalized or internalized as madness. And along with that, I think comes this fear of madness or fear of being labeled as mad. It also turns out that a lot of rumors, if you look at the literature on rumors in particular, not just misinformation or disinformation, rumors are statements that are at the time that they are circulating unverified, so could be true or false. And it turns out multiple studies, this is by no means, there's by no means a consensus on this, and some of the literature on fake news goes opposite to this conclusion, but there have been several studies that have shown in particular contexts that most rumors either are true or have a grain of truth in them, or I would say are expressing some facet of truth, or perhaps even just some feeling, some true feeling. And the previous researchers have also looked at as a way of, again, explicitly challenging these political power structures. So not only is there a well-established literature of deviance as being characterized as madness, I think, in a way that is consistent with the kind of like censorship, for lack of a better word, of those kinds of deviant behaviors or perspectives. Just the same, there's a well-established literature of these, you know, what we call rumors or unestablished facts that often get a pretty bad rap, especially in disinformation or misinformation, actually being in some cases these, you know, tools for counterpower. And it becomes really clear under this view why so many national governments are interested in disinformation research and in combating disinformation, because if we understand rumors or deviant beliefs as challenging power structures, I think, you know, of course, sometimes they're going to be like white supremacists spreading disinformation that I've also done research on trying to understand and stop. But I think often outside of those cases that I think are reprehensible, there are many other cases that seem to me mostly just political. And I consider the state's investment in combating that as just confirmatory evidence for that relationship of some forms of disinformation to power, especially since the state doesn't actually seem very concerned about white supremacy. So just to give you a little bit of another kind of shake to see, by comparison, if I were to say, oh, I think the earth is flat, I'm not going to say that because I don't think the earth is flat. I think it's probably round. But just for a comparison to understand how these epistemological claims can have these normative dimensions, a few other statements that I might make that I do believe are that British royalty are racist. And this is something that I've offended my British friends by saying, or that most police officers are racist. This is something that I hope, you know, a lot of people in the audience are sympathetic to, but I imagine maybe at least a couple of you aren't, and certainly many people would be quite offended by a belief like that. Along the lines of British royalty being racist, if you don't think that, can you imagine a Black Queen of England? there's been this recent news about the reporter who did an interview with Princess Diana just before Princess Diana died, and it made me look back at the interview, and the way that this is now being covered in the media, it's it's a bit strange, but when I look back at the interview, it reminds me so much of the Meghan Markle interview with Oprah, and I don't know, it just makes me think, Along the same lines, I mentioned Sasha Johnson at the beginning of the talk, who is the Black Lives Matter activist who was shot over the weekend in what's being described in the news. I don't know any more than what's being presented in the news about it, but what's being described in the news as a drive-by shooting, and being characterized by a lot of sources as probably gang warfare. I think that is, maybe, but it sounds like a way to really, I don't know, racially characterize the situation in one that I think is plausibly, very plausibly, a targeted attack. So was I forced out of my role at the OAI because of my flat earth research? That was the question. And what I've just laid out is a kind of explanation or understanding of flat earth beliefs from the perspective of round earth beliefs being a social norm for which you are sanctioned against. And so are flat earth beliefs a threat to Oxford? Or why would they be? And what about academic freedom? Well, unfortunately, there are some confounding factors in exploring why I might have felt forced out of Oxford and the Oxford Internet Institute, including just a few months into my being here, a speech that I gave at one of the UCU strikes, pictured here, in which I complained about a couple things going on at Oxford and the Oxford Internet Institute, besides their dedication to round earth beliefs. And one of those at the time was the announcement of the Schwarzman Center for the Humanities. For anyone who was at the OAI when I was at the OAI, I'm sure that you're sick of hearing me talk about this. But I feel some duty to the Oxford Internet Institute and to the students especially there to continue to preach the good word about this stuff. The Schwarzman Center was an exciting development for the University of Oxford because the gift given by billionaire Stephen Schwarzman was of unprecedented size and a boon for the humanities at the university. What's often not at the top of the headlines for the Schwarzman Center is that it turns out one of the reasons that Schwarzman was willing to give this gift was because he insisted on there being an AI ethics center in the Center for the Humanities. And when the Vice Chancellor agreed to this, that is when this plan for the Center for the Humanities became a reality. The university had been planning to create a Center for the Humanities for a long time and been trying to fundraise for that. And Schwarzman was willing to do that if the university was willing to also develop this AI ethics center, which hadn't been in their plans previously for that Center for the Humanities. Schwarzman is confidant of Trump, CEO and chairman of the Blackstone Group, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the world, and became one of the largest rental real estate owners in the world after buying up repossessed houses from people who had their houses taken away from the banks, and then in some cases at least renting those houses back to the people who had just had them repossessed. Schwarzman is also interesting because as someone interested in AI ethics, he seems to be interested in a very particular kind of AI ethics. Just looking at, I haven't been following this too closely, but when the announcements were first coming out last year about what the first talks at the Schwarzman Center for AI Ethics were going to be, I just noticed that a lot of them were featuring these kind of libertarian thinkers and people who are going to have a very particular view on what AI does and could do. And it turns out that Oxford is not the only place where Schwarzman is creating these centers, but also at MIT and at the Tsinghua University in China, which is the top university in China. And it is very reminiscent to me of the concerted campaign that the Koch brothers undertook in the United States in order to influence the kind of political climate there through universities and investment in universities. What I find especially ironic about this situation, and I'll tie this back to flat Earth in a moment, is that the OII had to raise, I don't know if they've done this yet, I'm kind of, I've been gone for a few months and some of my information is out of date, but at the time that I was there, the OII would have to raise, I think it was something like 20 million pounds to fundraise to be in the building at all. Like the OII, because it's in the social science division, wasn't a direct beneficiary of this gift. That was for the humanities division, but they still wanted, or you all still wanted to be in the building. Yet at the same time that this fundraising initiative for 20 million pounds is going on, there are many graduate students and graduate students of color in this year post George Floyd, when anti-racism is like the word on the street, that are not just far from fully funded, but really struggling. And I think this contradiction speaks for itself. But it's also related to the second thing that I had complained about in that speech I gave at the UCU Industrial Action now a year and a half ago or so, which was also that I have heard credible reports of bullying and harassment of all sorts, almost any sort you could imagine at the OII, perpetrated by several faculty members, faculty to student bullying and harassment, that has been ongoing for years without meaningful accountability. And this really made me mad. I did a lot of work around trying to address this while I was at the Oxford Internet Institute, institutional work, and the students were doing that work before me and continue to, and I hope there's been progress, but I can't tell from the website. And part of what I talked about in the speech that I gave at the UCU Industrial Action was how casualized labor and staff turnover and student turnover is part and parcel of why this kind of culture can be maintained, where there is a culture of disbelief, or at least expressed disbelief, among the faculty and among the senior management in the department. And the connection between that casualization or precarious academic labor and precarious students is that the cycle, it seems to me, is people who can tolerate this environment or people who don't see or don't understand the environment are the people who stay, and those who can't tolerate it or those who are affected by it tend to be the ones who leave. And what this has created, in my view, is a very dire situation for the Oxford Internet Institute, where in a year, again, of increasing attention and scrutiny to anti-racism globally, the department has lost nearly all its faculty of color. And I don't know, I left too. And who remains? I don't know. So this is an example of what Miranda Fricker calls, in Miranda Fricker is an analytical philosopher. Kate Sim has also explored this kind of argument. Kate Sim is a major inspiration for me. This is an example of epistemic injustice, which is in various ways the disenfranchisement of people's particular lived experiences as testimony or as forms of testimony, either along the lines of dismissal, so not believing someone just because of a particular characteristic, you maybe don't believe them because of their race or their gender, or hermeneutically, not even having the concepts potentially to express the situation that you're in. So thinking about belief and disbelief at the OII, you don't believe your own students that bullying and harassment is a major issue, yet you trust people you don't know that the earth is round. You trust these scientists. You trust, I guess you know your teachers, but this is the contradiction that I want to point out and end this talk with, which is that the type of evidence you rely on for believing the earth is round, that kind of social evidence, that testimony from others that you consider reliable or unreliable, that social evidence underlies your belief that the earth is round, very likely. And it's the same type of evidence for the sexism, racism, bullying, and harassment that's at the OII, yet you are not applying the same epistemic standards, it seems, at least in your expressions of belief for those two different facts. So speaking purely from a logical, rational standpoint, if you don't believe racism, bullying, and harassment are endemic at the OII, then logically speaking, it's the logic that's telling you, not me, you should also be a flat earther. Sorry to break the news to you. This only applies to people who are in particular management or powerful positions that would actually have heard about any of this stuff before, but none of whom I think are actually in this audience. But to take this back to my research questions, my first hypothesis, that for most of you in the room, you shouldn't be as certain as you claim to be that the earth is round. I think that I have at least hopefully presented to you a coherent argument, if not a compelling one. But my initial hypothesis that you claim to be certain makes you look ridiculous to me. I don't think that hypothesis held up for me after working through this argument, because if you claim to be certain that the earth is round, you should also be certain about the climate in the department. And I don't know, I think it's reasonable to be certain about both of those things. So what's ridiculous to me is not your beliefs about the shape of the earth, but about the contradictions between your beliefs. So this poll is a research question, and I'm curious to see the answer to this research of, will this talk be censored by the OII? The options are yes, it will be censored by the OII. No, it won't be, maybe. Or I'm the event coordinator and I promise to post it. Or I'm the event coordinator and sorry, this talk is too dangerous to post. Oh no, that would be bad news. I'm not the event coordinator, so I can't say that.
The event coordinator is not allowed to vote in this poll because she's running it. It's logistics, just for the record.
Fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that's the talk. So we can see the result of those and then go to discussion. I think we have about 20 minutes for discussion.
Pete, do you want to wait for the results to come in, or do you want me to throw the first question your way?
Oh, first question, please. Thank you.
Okay, statement. That was great. I think the slide which began with the heading "Speaking Truth to Power," for me, I think that was really the connective tissue throughout it, and I liked it. I loved it. I will do what I can to ensure that this is posted, but well, we shall see
Don't make any promises that you'll regret, Tomas.
Well, it's a voluntary position. So, okay, the first question, I think Hendrik had a question about 20 minutes ago. I'm just going to read it verbatim, and then you can chew it over, or if you'd like time to kind of give it some thought, then just let me know. But okay, so I would be interested in how Peaks entertained the possibility that the Earth is flat with friends and colleagues. It's one thing to investigate flat Earth theories and models and try to accommodate them with scientific or personal knowledge. It's another thing to dismiss all the available scientific knowledge and make use of the various tools of science denial, red herrings, misrepresentation of evidence, ad hominem attacks. The latter is quite regularly done by members of the flat Earth community. So that I think, yeah, the crux of it is that first bit. I would be interested in how Peaks entertain the possibility that the Earth is flat with friends and colleagues.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm definitely, yeah, not, oops, can you hear me?
Yeah, let's start.
Sorry?
Yeah, can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not personally familiar with like the details of all of the flat Earth mathematical models and that kind of thing. So I couldn't defend all of the flat Earth arguments in such great detail, but most people that I talk to just actually haven't thought about it very much. And so a lot of those kind of like frequently asked questions, like different like plane windows and flight times. I mean, the same kinds of things come up a lot. And so, you know, when I started out this project, I was actually one of the 100% certain. I mean, I kind of like, I don't know. It's not like, I think I still am 100% certain. I don't know. It's hard to like, I don't even know if I believe in the quantification of belief in that form. But when I started this project, I was definitely like planning to prove flat earthers wrong or whatever. And it's actually funny because it's a meme in the community too. And I say that as if it's a community I'm part of, but I'm not. Like I don't interact, I just observe really. Except to the extent that I'm like, I don't know. I guess that's complicated too. But there's this meme that like a lot of people come to the community trying to disprove that the Earth is flat, and then come to find that it's actually like kind of hard. And I very much fit into that stereotype of like a lot of the simple tests you can do without a lot of planning or without doing a lot of like math and geometry are actually not that hard to, are kind of not that easy to get positive results for round Earth. And so, yeah, kind of like if you try out a few things and nothing's working, then you start to really question the basis for people's beliefs.
Okay, awesome. I haven't seen any follow-up from Hendrik, so let's assume that is a question both posed and answered. I have just a question, well, yeah, a prompt, if you will, not so much a question. At one point, you were discussing rumors and power, and you used a turn. There was a turn of phrase in there that I was just hoping you could kind of pick up on and like expound on a little bit more. And it was just, you mentioned something to do with disinformation as tools for counterpower. And I suppose I'm somewhat familiar, and other people in this session will probably be familiar with that in some contexts, but maybe not this one. It's just sort of not the milieu I've heard it within. So I'm just kind of curious, can you kind of expound on what you mean by that, and how you see this fitting into that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to make clear that the stuff I was saying about the OAI climate is, I do not consider disinformation under the definition that disinformation is intentionally false information. I mean, I think that is, true rumors that are a form of counterpower in that case. And in general, I think disinformation itself as a term is never, maybe, often not, except in the most cartoonish cases of like fake news sites created by Russian, propagandists or whatever. That like, I've never met one of those people. I don't actually know what they're thinking, but at least the abstract picture of that like evil other making fake news just for the pure sake of like undermining another nation. I think usually disinformation is just like propaganda. It's usually not like totally false. It's more about like exaggerating the kinds of things that are going to resonate with people. And to that extent, I mean, the idea of counterpower is, there are these institutions like Oxford and like, British democracy and British monarchy and everything else, these structures of power that are maintaining the positions that people have in society, whether those are high positions or low positions. And the idea of counterpower, building counterpower, is more or less just organizing resistance and building institutions, alternative institutions or counter institutions that are not even necessarily a threat to those dominant forms of power, although I think it's often conceptualized that way, and it's almost in the word counterpower. I think they can also just be a refuge, or just be some institutions that that keep people safe, that the existing dominant institutions don't keep safe. And so, to the extent that disinformation, or more broadly propaganda, can play a role in that, there's of course a long history of pamphleteering, and calling it propaganda sounds like a negative thing, but just like advertising or any form of mass communication or persuasion, the idea of putting out your own frame, and putting out your own frame in a way that will bring others towards your cause, I think is one way that social movements have to operate.
Awesome. Okay. So I see, some more questions. Okay, this is a great one. The devil's advocates have come out of the woodwork. This is a great question from Paula Shepard. Do you think we should extrapolate this logic, that is like always don't be 100% sure, to other conspiracies like those followed by anti-vaxxers and those opposed to 5G and so on and so on?
like I was kind of referring to a moment ago, I don't think like when I think about my own beliefs about the shape of the Earth, I'm pretty sure like I would be pretty darn surprised if it turns out the Earth is flat. I mean, that would be like, wow, That would, I think that would be the most surprising thing that I've ever learned. Maybe. I just don't know if quantification is particularly useful or a particularly useful way of thinking about belief. I don't know. This is another thing that that we could go back and forth on, just like what beliefs are, or whether it's even useful to be using beliefs as a part of our like ontology for how we think about human behavior, the ways that people experience the world. I do think, though, to the extent that my larger point here is one about having empathy for people who hold beliefs that are that there are normative forces against, at least in this particular Zoom conversation. I do think that point about, we should be treating these people as human and as seeking to understand where they're coming from, and also doing that with the understanding that people usually have reasons, or people's reasons for things might not map onto like how you or I think about the reasons we have for certain things we say, or beliefs that we might feel we have. And so, if
Being them intellectual equals in a way.
Yeah, and not even intellectual equals, because I think intellectualism is one of the paradigms that like probably a lot of us here are caught up in. Yeah, I think that it's just as easily seen as differences in values compared to differences in beliefs. And I think 5G here is a little bit of an easier argument to make, since I expect that people here are a little bit more hostile towards tech than you are towards people who might challenge public health efforts, which I think I personally don't want to. I'm not in the business of trying to undermine like the COVID vaccination program or whatever. So just, politically speaking, from my own value system, I wouldn't want to be exploring that as a particular example. But
Peaks, I don't want to cut you off, but there's a bunch of hands now.
Oh, are there? I didn't even see that.
And also my bandwidth is.
Oh yeah, great.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, conveniently, just as there's plenty of questions to be asked. My bandwidth.
I think you get the point. Yeah.
Okay. So, if I can pivot to Julia. Julia, do you want to just pose this question? Because I'm getting questions to several different channels here.
Yeah. Hi, Peaks. I have a question from an anonymous.
Do you want to?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I have a question from an anonymous member of the OII student body, which is, do you think that formal avenues are the best method for addressing bullying and harassment at the OII?
Wow, such a difficult question.
Yeah, feel free to skip it, I guess.
I think, it's been a while since I've been a student, and I've never been a student at the OII. But in my understanding, and I've experienced some of the stuff in my own right as just like a junior scholar, or whatever they call me, early career researcher. But yeah, I mean, it's quite a bind. there's definitely real risk in putting forward formal complaints, and the odds are stacked against you, and it's not your job. It's the department's job, and they already know, or they should know, because of everything I was just saying. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's on them.
Yeah, thanks so much for answering that, and thanks for speaking out on this.
Okay, I think the next person was David Zeitlin. David, do you want to just pose your question directly?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks very much, Peaks. I'm not quite sure what I want to say. I want to give you a parallel case which has been long explored in the philosophy literature, which goes by the slogan "brain in a vat." In other words, how can I tell that I am not a brain in a vat? It's the sort of matrix problem. So leading up to that, I want to take us back to old style anthropology, Edward Evans Pritchard, Witchcraft, Oracles and Magic, 1937, which introduced the idea of secondary elaborations. In other words, you can always come up with an explanation that preserves the phenomena to maintain whatever theory you wish to, or set of assertions which you wish to associate. So worrying about testing may not be helpful. In other words, we have to think far more about ideology and power, all the things that you've actually been talking about. And I think that worrying about testing sort of takes us down the wrong sort of rabbit hole. And my final comment is that increasingly, I think that, well, to summarize, I don't believe in belief. In other words, belief is a particular English, Euro-American concept that has been immensely polluted by ideas from Christianity and Islam, all those Semitic religions. And as analysts, it's not helpful. What I do find more helpful are ideas from Robert Brandom, the philosopher, he talks about things like commitments. In other words, what do you actually do? Somebody in the chat started talking about making bets. That's one aspect of it. But I mean, how much difference does it make to your life? And if it doesn't, well, fine. But I mean, you will find people with particular, what English speakers will call beliefs, and it makes a difference. So my question is, what difference does it make to believe in this?
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think that, I mean, we've had most of those conversations before, I think just privately, and they're all great points. I think we agree substantively, probably on all of them. Although I would love to learn more from you about how belief has been polluted by Judaic religions, or Abrahamic religions. I think I don't know the details of that. Yeah, I think, so when I was preparing this talk, I was thinking about what to do and what I wanted to say. And, I was faced with a situation where I only have so many hours I can prepare this talk. And like, I think that if I were to be like, okay, I want to, like, I'm going to Oxford to give a talk, and like David is a senior academic, I've got to like address the comments that David has made on my work to make this talk better. Like that would have been, I think, what I would have done a few years ago if I were trying to like make this talk really tight theoretically and much more in line with the disciplinary standards of anthropology. And I still hope to publish at least some of this someday, and your comments will be really helpful for you know, playing that kind of publication game. But I think, you know, what I wanted to do in the end instead, and where I wanted to focus my time and energy, was exactly as you say, communicating about what I think is the most important thing that I could be talking to this audience about. And you phrase it really well, that talking about evidence seems like it's missing the point. And I wouldn't have noticed this if you hadn't pointed it out, but I mean, I do think that's ultimately what I came away from those, you know, conversations I had with people about round earth beliefs, right? Like, no one seems to be basing their beliefs mostly. I mean, a few people I've talked to have like really thought about this stuff a lot, but both people who think the earth is round and people who think the earth is flat, actually the flat earthers have thought about it a lot more, but especially people who think the earth is round, you know, they don't rely on tests. It's not about the like hard, direct evidence. And that's exactly the point where, you know, when thinking about the second kind of component of my talk focused on bullying and harassment, there's always, the response is always from a university or from an organization or from an institution, you know, where's the evidence? You know, we don't have any evidence of it, like it's, and we don't carry forward that kind of epistemology, which is a social epistemology that we use to understand the world and thinking about physical reality in the case of the shape of the earth, where even though it's a physical reality, we're still relying on testimony ultimately and foremost, and yet not in this other case that I think is actually vastly more important. And so I'm right there with you. And I think that, you know, that type of thinking and, you know, thinking about social theory and like the contingency of scientific discoveries has greatly informed my own scientific practice, which I wanted this talk to also exemplify. I mean, I think that, you know, to many people in math or physics, I came from a math background, a computer science background. The talk that I just gave wouldn't even be considered research. You know, like it doesn't look anything like research in the physical sciences or mathematics or the mathematical areas. But like, you know, maybe I should have given you all consent forms before giving this talk, because like to some extent, I'm just like, I don't see what I'm doing here as separate from the other work.
Thank you very much. That's excellent.
Peaks. So there's about 6 minutes left. Well, there's exactly 6 minutes left. With 100% certainty, I can say that. There were sort of two halves, in a certain sense, to the talk, and it's your 6 minutes to do with what you want. So I have kind of two questions. One leads down the left-hand path, and one the right. One, you know, is we're back at flat Earth beliefs per se, and it's about that. The other more to do with bullying and harassment at the OII. How do you wish to proceed? A or B?
Gosh, if I had my way, I would just go hide under a desk. Don't even have a bed or a blanket. It's up to you, Tomas.
Okay. B it is. Okay. Anonymous, a student question again. Really relating back to the points you're making about epistemic injustice again. I'm just going to again read this verbatim. I'd like to hear their thoughts on how to change the culture at the OII. It feels like this is impossible at the moment, and nothing is working to ignite change. What can we do?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I mean, again, you know, obviously I haven't stopped trying. Here I am, but the calculus that I determined for myself upon deciding to leave, like, I mean, I did feel forced out, but I didn't, but I felt like I could have resisted that force. Like, I think I could have, you know, I could have fought and stayed. I just didn't think I could do that and be a sane person, whatever that means. I just couldn't do that and have like a high quality of life. And it's really like, as a student right now, and you don't have such an easy option. I mean, it's not easy to leave a job. It's even harder though to leave a degree program, I think, because there's such clear goals and endpoints. And, you know, my calculus was, this isn't going to change anytime soon. And my being at the Institute would just make it a less safe place for future students, because they might see that I'm there and see that I'm doing work to try to change something, and thereby think this might be okay. And, you know, I got some advice from a wise friend along those lines, and decided that, yeah, in my estimation, I couldn't crack the code. I think I'm happy to talk about it more if you want to send me a note. But whatever is necessary, I think it would have to be a major undertaking, and such a major undertaking could have different forms. And personally, with everything going on in the world, I didn't have the energy for that.
Got it. Okay, well, I guess we have 2 minutes. There are other questions that maybe if people want to pose, we can follow up in an email. We can find ways of carrying the conversation on. The different conversations that are ongoing here. I guess I can just say thank you so much for, you know, a talk that led us in many different directions, and that there was clearly so many layers of like the personal, and this is really interesting research unto itself. And there, I could tell that, you know, you've put a lot of yourself into this, and so that's much appreciated. So I think, Isabel, do you have any kind of you know, logistical parting thoughts? I know that this was recorded, so we can share the recording after the fact, and we'll figure out how that works.
Thank you everyone for attending. I was just going to go as far as saying thank you so much for your time, Peaks. And Tomas, do you want to just briefly mention the talk happening in a few weeks' time, the week 8 talk?
Yes, so details to follow, further details. But Leonie Schulte, Kate Sim, Mia Hassoun, think that's on, yes, Monday of week 8. If you're on the mailing list already, you'll get the info that way. You can find it through Twitter as well. You can find it on our Facebook page. You can ask a friend. You can send me an email. But if you would like to know more about that, please just, yeah, let us know.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of day, and we will see you at the next talk. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.